After 20 years of fighting in and returning from the Trojan War, King Odysseus washes up nude on the shores of his home island, Ithaca, after a brief introduction on screen about himself and the conflict. Meanwhile, Prince Telemachus, who has never met his father, is tormented by the suitors vying for his mother's hand. Queen Penelope faces immense pressure from these suitors to select a new husband to claim the throne. Among them, Eurymachus threatens Telemachus, but Antinous, the chief suitor, intervenes. Antinous tries to persuade Telemachus to convince Penelope to marry him, promising to protect Telemachus and restore order to the island. However, Telemachus refuses, asserting that Antinous is no better than the others. As her father-in-law nears death, Queen Penelope occupies herself weaving his burial shroud. Telemachus urges her to choose a suitor and end the chaos, but Penelope insists she will make her decision only after completing the shroud. Meanwhile, two suitors find a man in the sea but dismiss him, claiming no more suitors are needed, and throw him back into the water. Later, these same suitors hunt a girl on land. When they discover she is not in her boyfriend's tent, they kill him in cold blood. Odysseus is discovered on the shore by the swineherd Eumaeus, who takes him to his home and tends to his injuries. The next day, another swineherd, Hippotas, criticizes Eumaeus for helping a stranger, warning that it could bring trouble. Eumaeus responds that they haven't yet turned them into animals. As Odysseus recovers, he shares his haunting memories of the Trojan War with Eumaeus, Hippotas, and Felicius. He describes fighting alongside Odysseus, recounting how they slaughtered the Trojans and burned the city to the ground. The once mighty warrior king is now a broken man, burdened by the physical and emotional scars of war. Hippotas, frustrated, angrily questions why Odysseus hasn't returned if he's still alive, accusing him of abandoning his people and leaving them to suffer. At night, Penelope secretly observes her maids engaging in sexual relations with the suitors. Each evening, she unravels a small portion of the burial shroud she has been weaving. One night, Telemachus confronts Penelope, questioning why she sneaks away nightly. Hearing rumors about her, he accuses her of being unfaithful, unaware of her covert act of undoing the shroud. The next day, Telemachus visits his grandfather, the old king, to bring him back to the palace. However, the old king, now suffering from dementia, has lost hope after waiting in vain for Odysseus to return. Determined to find answers, Telemachus leaves the island with fishermen to search the mainland for news of his father. Meanwhile, Queen Penelope seeks Antinous' help in locating Telemachus. Antinous uses the opportunity to pressure her into choosing him as her husband, insisting Odysseus is dead. In private discussions with other suitors, he advises against killing Telemachus for now. Later, Antinous' men search for Telemachus at the old king's home, only to find the old king has passed away. Eumaeus informs Odysseus of the king's death, and Odysseus secretly attends the funeral, watching from behind a tree. As the suitors intensify their demands for Penelope to remarry, claiming Odysseus is surely dead, she announces she will use the shroud as her wedding gown and promises to choose a suitor soon. However, in private, she wonders how much longer she can endure their relentless pressure. The next day, Odysseus asks Eumaeus to take him to the palace. As they arrive, Odysseus' loyal hunting dog, Argos, recognizes him despite the years of waiting. Overcome with emotion, Odysseus sheds a tear as Argos takes his final breath. Inside the palace, Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, pleads for food, claiming to be an old soldier who fought in Troy. Most of the suitors mock and mistreat him, throwing food at him. They force him into a fight with a giant man, whom Odysseus ultimately kills. He remains in the palace until nightfall. When a maid tries to force him to leave, Penelope intervenes, inviting him to stay and speak with her. Odysseus keeps his face hidden in the shadows, so Penelope cannot recognize him. After their conversation, she instructs the maid to care for him and sends him away. Later, Penelope breaks down, destroying the shroud she has been weaving and weeping. As Eurycleia, Odysseus' former nursemaid, bathes him, she recognizes a scar on his leg and realizes his true identity. Odysseus swears her to secrecy. The next day, Odysseus visits his father's tomb, mourning his loss and blaming himself for leaving his family to go to war. He laments not being able to see their faces one last time. Meanwhile, Telemachus returns from his journey and reunites with his mother, Penelope. She urges him to leave the island, warning that the suitors view him as a threat to their ambitions. However, Telemachus refuses to flee. As he leaves the room, Antinous enters and pressures Penelope to choose him as her husband, threatening to kill Telemachus if she does not comply. Odysseus considers leaving the island, but Eumaeus stops him, revealing that he had recognized Odysseus from the start. Shortly after, Telemachus arrives and instructs Eumaeus to gather the other swineherds, as the suitors and their men will soon be after them. Antinous proposes to the other suitors that they hunt down and kill Telemachus. In their pursuit, the suitors torture others for information about Telemachus's whereabouts, even killing a slave during interrogation. They unleash hunting dogs to track him. When two of the pursuers approach, Telemachus, unable to remain silent, draws attention to their position. Odysseus quickly knocks him out to silence him, and skillfully kills the two suitors as they close in. Eurymachus leads a search at Eumaeus' house, looking for clothing to give the hounds a scent, and kills Hippotas in the process. To escape, Odysseus, Telemachus, Eumaeus, and their companions hide behind a waterfall near a pool, successfully confusing the hound's trail. Despite the worsening political and economic conditions on Ithaca and Odysseus' failure to bring back Ithacan warriors, Telemachus is displeased to discover that Odysseus is his father. He reluctantly accepts the reality of Odysseus' decades-long absence. Meanwhile, Penelope is forced to make a decision after Antinous catches her unraveling her weaving. Word spreads among the suitors that Penelope will choose a husband the next day, and they gather at the palace. Penelope announces that she will not choose a suitor, but instead test them by challenging them to shoot an arrow through the holes of 12 axe heads without touching any of them, using Odysseus' ancient bow. The suitors protest, claiming it is an impossible shot that no one can achieve. Penelope counters by stating that Odysseus had accomplished it in the past. Each suitor attempts the challenge, but is unable even to string the bow. Odysseus asks the queen for permission to try, and she grants it. As Odysseus steps forward, he heats the bow by the fire while the suitors mock him. Undeterred, he successfully strings the bow and shoots the arrow cleanly through the axe heads, leaving everyone in shock. The suitors demand that Odysseus leave, but panic erupts when he begins shooting them one by one. He orders Penelope and Telemachus to leave the room, but Telemachus chooses to stay and support his father. He shuts the doors to prevent the suitors from escaping as Odysseus continues to shoot them one by one. After exhausting his arrows, Odysseus engages the remaining suitors in brutal hand-to-hand combat, with Telemachus fighting alongside him. When Antinous surrenders, Penelope, weary of violence and longing for peace, pleads with Telemachus to spare his life. However, to her horror, Telemachus kills him. Determined to uncover his identity and destiny, Telemachus insists on setting sail. Meanwhile, Odysseus notices Penelope using a bed unfamiliar to him. Curious, he ascends to a hidden room, where he discovers their old bed, which Penelope had concealed when he left for the Trojan War. She explains that before they can move forward, they must confront and remember the past. Together, they realize that understanding and accepting what happened is essential before they can let go. A picture of Telemachus' ship crashing into the ocean is shown after the image of Odysseus' blood being washed away in a basin. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy to hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice, just to be sure. It would be best if you watched the whole movie. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this.